At this stage, it is obvious that both the kin and the authorities are doing everything possible to bring Nancy back. However, 4 specific observations jumped out at a retired agent I spoke with after he reviewed Savannah's public appeal. I can actually share a bit of breaking news here. I had a conversation with a lead investigator earlier this afternoon. Starting this Monday, the entire probe will be handed over to a specialized federal task force. 50 days have passed. 50 days since Nancy Guthrie disappeared from the residence she called home for nearly 5 decades. 50 days since her medical monitor sent its final pulse at exactly 2:28 a.m. 50 days have ticked by since bloodstains were found on the front steps of the house she cherished, a sanctuary that had always felt perfectly safe. 50 days of total silence, no cuffs, no named person of interest. We haven't seen a public breakthrough yet, but criminal inquiries don't always move with a bang. Often, they tighten the net in silence. This week, the energy shifted not through emotion or drama, but through cold, hard strategy. Before proceeding, I must clarify one point. Every detail mentioned here comes from public records, vetted interviews, and official briefings from authorized police personnel. To be clear, no one has been formally accused yet. There have been no convictions, and the search is very much ongoing. If you possess valid leads, please reach out to the Bureau immediately. Let's look at the recent turning point. For several weeks, the Guthrie family had mostly kept to themselves. They offered only short updates, begged for information, and attended vigils, but they never steered the public narrative. That changed on day 50 when they issued a formal press release. No tearful video or live event, just a typed, official message. Press releases distributed during this phase of a high-level federal investigation are never just a casual coincidence. Every syllable is scrutinized, vetted, and polished. Nothing in those lines happens by mistake. In that specific message, the relatives mentioned a detail that immediately sparked the interest of profilers and investigators alike. They stated their belief that Tucson and the surrounding southern Arizona region hold the secret to solving this. That isn't vague talk. That is a pinpointed direction. They didn't use broad terms like someone out there or wherever you are. They explicitly named Tucson. That specific word is heavy with meaning, because when a family involved in an FBI-led kidnapping case identifies a city in a pre-approved statement, it isn't just a hopeful guess. It is a deliberate signal. In high-stakes criminal probes, language is a tool. Words are chosen to nudge, apply heat, or communicate secretly with a target audience. By claiming Tucson has the answers, the family isn't talking to the general public. They are speaking directly to someone local. Now, pair that with another major development that surfaced this week. A veteran behavioral profiler with decades of expertise in tracking criminal movement patterns introduced a game-changing term for this case: a marauder. This isn't just a fancy word used for dramatic effect. In the world of profiling, geographic predators usually fall into 2 buckets: commuters or marauders. A commuter travels from far outside the target zone. They drive in, commit the act, and then vanish back to another region. A marauder, however, works from within the community. They leave their house, strike, and then return to their own neighborhood. If this predator is a marauder, it changes everything. It implies he likely lives nearby, holds a local job, drives these same roads daily, and shops at the same stores. It suggests we aren't looking for someone who flew in for a hit and then disappeared across the country. It means this individual might still be part of Tucson's daily social fabric. Furthermore, when you look at the timeline, a pattern emerges that is hard to ignore. January 11th, a Sunday. January 24th, a Saturday. And February 1st, in the early hours of Sunday. Every single significant date in this investigation lands on a weekend. Consistency like that points to a specific lifestyle. A person's schedule dictates their opportunities. Someone who only strikes on weekends usually has a restricted weekday life, likely a standard 9-to-5 job, where a random absence would raise immediate red flags. But the weekends offer a window of freedom, privacy, and the time needed to plan. If someone needed several trips to scout the home, check for cameras, and track the victim's routine, weekends would be the ideal time. Think about the surveillance photos. Reports indicate at least 2 distinct visits occurred. During the first, he had no bag and seemed to be in scouting mode. He approaches, scans the area, and assesses the situation before walking away. That isn't a random impulse, it's professional reconnaissance. Then, weeks later, the gear appears: a backpack, a fitted mask, and a holstered weapon. He stayed inside for 41 minutes. 41 minutes. That isn't a panicked crime, it's a cold execution, and that time gap between visits tells us something critical. An offender who can start, stop, and return later isn't in a rush. Someone who can just walk away and come back weeks later is almost certainly a local. It's someone who can drive over without a second thought, because that neighborhood is a familiar backyard, not a far-off destination. Detectives are now eyeing an empty lot next to Nancy's home as a possible base for the crime. Abandoned houses grant a dangerous advantage: the power to remain unseen. Nobody questions a dark window in a vacant home or a truck parked where it seems to belong. From inside those walls, someone could track every routine without ever showing their face on the street. Watching lights, visitors, and schedules surveillance without any risk. This is where the net begins to pull tight. If the suspect had access to that house and worked nearby, perhaps in construction, they had a major edge. Credibility. People expect to see laborers. They arrive early, stay late, and blend into the background while observing everything. Identifying solitary residents and security blind spots over several weeks creates a lethal tactical map. This act required a plan. Nancy was 84, lived alone, and was dependent on daily heart medicine. Her heart monitor stopped at 2:28 in the morning. The perpetrator clearly understood the rhythm of her life. That level of insight does not come from a chance encounter. It requires methodical, predatory scouting. The sheriff's recent statement about knowing more than he can say is not a sign of a cold case. It is the language of an impending arrest. Cases go silent when a name surfaces to keep the suspect unaware. Stop here, because the forensic details are now colliding with the family's deep emotional pain. The family mentions something overlooked. They cannot honor Nancy's life until she reaches her final resting place. Her final resting place. They didn't say until she returns. Those specific words were chosen with a heavy, deliberate meaning. That phrasing was likely vetted. It suggests the family is bracing for a tragic reality despite their fading hopes. It has been 50 days without a single sign of life. An 84-year-old woman missing her medication, with no ransom demands and no contact. Total silence. In these investigations, silence usually means the detectives are closing in rather than losing the trail. The clues are now pointing toward a very specific target: a perpetrator from the local community, a routine, a staging area, and a shrinking map. This isn't a broad search anymore. The circle is closing. If the behavioral profiles are accurate, the person responsible is not hiding in another state. He is likely in town, perhaps passing memorials or standing in the crowd at a vigil. Such offenders often return to the scene emotionally, even if they avoid it physically. They watch for reactions and monitor news. Police are looking for this specific behavior. They are watching closely. Meanwhile, DNA processing in a lab could be the final step to secure a conviction. Forensic genealogy does its work in the shadows, slowly building out a family tree. It expands quietly, link by link, until it points directly to one specific person. 50 days in, the surface seems calm, but the investigation is more intense and focused than ever. If you look past the headlines at the actual evidence, you won't see a mess. You see a distinct pattern. Patterns win cases. For 50 days, the public has focused on the lack of news. No cuffs, no named suspects, and no official motive have been released to the press. But for professional investigators, a lack of public updates is often a sign of significant internal progress. In fact, when a case moves from a wide search to a targeted analysis, it naturally becomes quieter. This investigation has been steadily narrowing its focus. Let's look at the geographic profile. Analysts view a crime scene as a point tied to a base. They call him a marauder. This wasn't a guess for television. It was applying a proven geographic criminal model. Marauders strike from home, hit a comfort zone, then return to familiar territory. They don't travel far or use hotels. They simply blend back into their lives. Catalina Foothills is a quiet, orderly place. Moving through it undetected requires local familiarity. A stranger would be obvious. A local knows the terrain and the fastest ways to vanish after the crime. Right hinted the escape route probably headed towards southern Tucson. Right, avoiding northern peaks and dodging the heavy traffic out west. Moving south offers smoother getaways and better hiding spots in the suburbs. This path is vital since mapping habits often reveals links between timing and weekends. Routine, an established way of life. It starts sketching a portrait of a local resident. Let's shift to how they got in. Detectives are apparently rounding up IDs for all tradespeople working near Nancy's place through January and early February. This move is calculated, not accidental. Constant access to a job site provides a massive advantage. Hiding in plain sight. Someone on the clock can show up in the dark. They linger for hours, pacing the sidewalk unnoticed while scouting the neighborhood. Over time, that entry allows a stalker to chart every movement. Who drives what? Who is home? Who is living by themselves? Are the alarms on? It is all about spotting habits, something this hit absolutely depended on. Nancy's physical limits, her pill schedule, and that 2 a.m. window point to an insider's view. Information gathered through patience. Then there is the empty building next door, the perfect place to stay hidden. From within, a predator watches invisibly, tracking when lights flick on and who pulls into the drive. Had that spot served as a base of operations, it clarifies how the perps spied without being caught. Now, look back at the dates. Early footage from January 11th, another hit on the 24th, then the final act on February 1st. 3 Saturdays, 3 encounters. This was not a sudden outburst, it was a dry run. The opening move was just scouting. No break-in, no fight, just sizing things up. But the next time, they came prepared. That change signals a breakthrough. The suspect picked up a key detail about the schedule or a weak spot. Let's talk forensics. They found unknown genetic material inside the residence. It does not match the victim or her guests. Word is, they have started the family tree tracking process. This tech skips the usual police files, diving instead into public ancestry sites. All it takes is one third cousin who uploaded their kit. Numbers-wise, the odds of having no kin in these systems nowadays are slim to none. They trace the roots from a slight hit, closing in until they find the person. It is silent, relentless work. If the killer is a neighborhood fixture and has roots here, the chance of a match skyrockets. We are talking statistics, not hunches. Pair that with the sheriff's latest tease. I have got plenty, but I am keeping quiet. Cops do not bluff like that. They hold back when the proof is there, but needs the lab's final stamp of approval. Or maybe talking too soon would ruin the trial. Detectives lock down info when the finish line is in sight. Being quiet is a tactic. We also need to look at another trait. These types often circle back not to strike again, but to feed off the chaos. They are glued to the TV and the vigils. They haunt the scene in person or online. We have seen this script before. It is all about the ego. The crime gives them a sense of power. Reliving the fallout keeps that high going. If he is a local, he has likely stood in the crowd outside the home, or rolled past the flowers, soaking in the pain he caused. Police are aware, so the cameras at the vigil might be looking for more than just vandals. Back to the family's words, they have got their eyes fixed on the city. Mentioning a final resting place is a grim admission. It shows they are bracing for the worst. 50 days gone, no signs of life, and she needs her meds. The facts are brutal, but the heat is not dying down. It is intensifying. The search area is shrinking. Staff lists gathered, empty lots searched, labs running code, public tone is firm. Convergence is happening right now. A silent, steady tightening of the net around a target. Assuming the Marauder profile is accurate, we're hunting someone with a normal work week who strikes only on weekends. This person is almost certainly a local, living just a short drive from the crime scene. The individual likely has a valid reason to be in that neighborhood, hiding dark, violent impulses behind a perfectly ordinary daily routine. Somewhere in Tucson, a resident is likely acting strangely, swapping their vehicle, dodging case discussions, or becoming eerily reserved since early February. Detectives aren't just guessing anymore. The search has become incredibly focused. It is all about data now, matching genetic markers, tracking movement patterns and vetting specific names against behavioral profiles. The killer is in the worst possible spot. The circle is closing, and he doesn't even know how close the police have gotten. 50 days have passed, and the lack of news is starting to feel permanent. Beneath that stillness, the evidence is finally aligning. Once the framework is solid, a resolution usually follows. We say 50 days, so often it risks becoming a mere statistic. But for a grieving family, that duration is an agonizing reality. That is 50 mornings of waking up to dread, and 50 sleepless nights haunted by questions that never stop. It is nearly 2 months of facing your worst nightmares, a burden the Guthrie family now carries every waking second. They have been incredibly brave from the start, doing everything possible by speaking directly to the public. They raised a reward of over $1 million and have been totally transparent with every police request. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings stood together, pleading through tears for just one honest answer from anyone watching. They chose to be vocal rather than hide, knowing that silence is the greatest enemy in a missing person case. But 50 days in, the way people are talking about the investigation has started to undergo a subtle shift. These small changes in wording matter. When a family mentions final resting places, they are clearly bracing for a tragic end. Those words were heavy with preparation. They are readying themselves for a truth the task force likely already suspects, even without a formal death notice. No one has officially called it a murder yet, but the sheer weight of reality is getting impossible to ignore. An 84-year-old with a heart condition, missing her meds and her pacemaker silent since February 1st time has simply run out. In these files, time is the enemy. When communication stops, the lack of noise tells its own grim story. Despite the massive reward and expanded national headlines, the phone has not rung with anything credible. A kidnapper wanting money would have reached out, a negotiator would have made their move by now. The total lack of contact effectively rules out any possibility of an abduction for profit. Now the investigation is pivoting from a rescue mission to a recovery operation, searching for a site rather than a person. Moving from hope to finding remains is a brutal transition, but it is the only logical step left for the team. That is the cold reality of where we are. Consider the pattern: January 11th and the subsequent Sunday attacks. January 24th and February 1st, 3 specific Sunday strikes show a clear, calculated routine by a local predator. He is operating from a home base and returning there immediately afterward. That is classic geographic profiling. He likely used that empty house as a staging ground, watching the neighborhood without anyone suspecting a thing. Having a legitimate reason to be at the construction site allowed him to study habits until he knew them by heart. With foreign DNA in hand and experts building family trees, his eventual exposure is now a mathematical certainty. Individually, these clues are just threads, but together they are a web that is rapidly closing in. The focus is sharpening onto a single individual, and the atmosphere around the case is starting to change. The public sees a stall, but investigators feel the heat. The sheriff saying "I know a lot" is a major tell. That phrase suggests the authorities have already pointed their compass toward a specific suspect. It means the target zone is tiny. Imagine being the killer, living right there in the city that is searching for you. He wakes up in Tucson, driving past billboards featuring the face of the woman he took. He is nodding at neighbors who have no idea they are living next door to a monster. He is glued to the news, hearing analysts describe his own habits and location with terrifying accuracy. He knows a lab in Florida is tracing his genetic history right now. That kind of pressure is soul-crushing. It is not just anxiety. It is the realization that once the genetic clock starts ticking, there is nowhere left to hide. It crawls forward inevitably, sifting through every distant relative and genetic scrap. The ancestral path narrows until there is no escape. You cannot outrun the mathematical reality of your own bloodline. If the culprit is currently blending into the Tucson landscape, their daily routine will eventually betray the monster within. Strip away the profiles and geographical maps to find the human tragedy at the heart of this investigation. Nancy Guthrie was so much more than just a morning news story. She was a mother and grandmother who had called that same house home for 50 years. After 5 decades of milestones and neighborly waves, she shared a final meal with her family before vanishing. She laughed during a game of cards, retiring to bed believing her world was the same safe sanctuary it had always been. She earned the right to see the sun rise and to walk through her own door without a single moment of dread. She deserved a peaceful retirement, yet her family is now stranded in a purgatory where neither hope nor closure exists. They wrote that they are unable to mourn, left only with a hollow ache and endless questions. That single line captures this mystery perfectly. Healing requires a final answer. Questions only bloom where the truth is hidden, but even the deepest secrets eventually come to light. Probes of this magnitude do not just evaporate, they reach a conclusion through patient, quiet, and relentless police work. Somewhere in Tucson tonight, a witness remembers every second of those 41 minutes. Someone knows where she was taken, exactly what went wrong, and the final choice that was made. Silence is only a temporary shield, because habits give you away, DNA identifies, and the search area always shrinks. This is not a cold case. It is a closing circle, tightening its grip on a smaller and smaller space. When the pressure peaks, the truth will surface. Nancy needs to be brought home so her family can finally say goodbye. The perpetrator must answer for their actions on February 1st. 50 days later, a breakthrough is closing in on one city and one waiting family. When the name is finally revealed, and it certainly will be, the identification won't feel like a random accident. It will simply be the inevitable conclusion to a pattern that was visible all along. Nancy Guthrie is owed a final answer, and that resolution is moving steadily toward the light. 50 days ago, Nancy Guthrie went to sleep in the sanctuary she had trusted for half a century. She cut the lights, expecting the sun to rise as usual, but everything changed between 2 and 2:28 a.m. A catastrophic event unfolded in that quiet Tucson community. For 50 days, her family has inhabited the wreckage left by the unthinkable. Denied the chance to mourn or find any sense of peace, they just wait for a phone call or a visitor who can provide some form of finality to end the nightmare. While the city moves on and the news cycles refresh, one chilling fact remains. The truth is out there. Someone in this town knows the secret of those 41 minutes and where Nancy is now. Someone knows how the story ends. Silence cannot wipe away guilt. It only delays the inevitable discovery by forensic evidence. Time is not a shield for the guilty, it is a magnifying glass. Nancy was never just a headline. She was a beloved wife and grandmother. Her family has faced this hell with incredible poise and dignity. They have been patient, but that patience is no substitute for the justice they are owed. If you hold any piece of this puzzle, now is the time to speak. 50 days of silence is 50 days too many.